one to talk with, all by myself. No one to walk with, but I'm happy on the shelf. Ain't misbehaving, saving my love for you.
Hello, and welcome to Roz's Random Ramblings. I am Roz, and here's today's ramblings. First, a fun fact. According to something called the Berlin K theory, the names for colors do not appear simultaneously, but gradually get built into a language over time, and usually in a fairly specific pattern. First, light and dark, or black and white, something like that. Next is red, then green and or yellow, followed by blue, then brown, and later purple, pink, orange, or gray. Another fun fact, pink doesn't actually exist. The pink outfit you've been saving to go out with the girls? I don't know what color it is, but it's not pink. Look it up if you don't believe me. But back to the color theory. Brent Berlin, an anthropologist, and Paul Kay, a linguist, researched a variety of languages, ancient and modern, and discovered that languages have different basic color terms, and that these terms are gradually created within a language as a culture needs them. And also, these tend to develop in stages. I'm not going to say more about that process of color naming because, well, I don't want to. At least, not right now. Today, I want to talk about the color green, which is usually one of the first colors to be created in a language. There's the fun fact tie-in, and try to answer the question, how can green simultaneously refer to something good and bad? What is the first thing you think of when you see the color green? Is it springtime or poison? Lawns or weeds? Freshly squeezed limes or moldy bread? Kermit the Frog or the Grinch? A tiny seedling bursting forth from the ground? Or a decaying corpse doing the same? Sorry, I probably didn't need to get that vivid. My point is that a color isn't just a color. It carries additional meaning and has emotional connotations. Okay, touchy-feely part out of the way, it's time to get to the nitty-gritty, which begins, once again, with the origins of the word. As you may expect by now, this is one of those words that we can trace back to Proto-Indo-European. Listen to my first episode for a little more about that, though I'll probably do a more thorough episode later. In Proto-Indo-European, or PIE, it was probably something like grey, but it didn't exactly mean green so much as grow. In other words, the name for the color likely came from the name for the new plants bursting from the ground. In fact, grow and grass are both considered cognates of green, meaning they likely all originally came from the same word. I knew there was a reason I was thinking of green when I did the last episode on lawns. Actually, it's pretty obvious when I say it out loud. Quick aside. You might now be expecting me to talk about the Norman invasion again, but no class struggles this episode. We do get some fancy words for green things from French. Verdant comes immediately to mind, but that came from a different PIE root and doesn't affect what I'm talking about this episode. From PIE grey, the word passed to Proto-German, where it was probably something like grüne, and from there split to become grün in modern Germany and green in English. Another aside. Someone once told me that German is easy for English speakers to learn. The first 1,000 words are the same as English. And I said, yes, that's true. But it's the next 30,000 words that worry me. Never mind the grammar. Back to green. So, clearly, the color was originally associated with a more pleasant idea of green, one connected with plants and new life bursting forth. So how did green also come to be associated with deadly substances? The answer is clear. Blame art. Not a person named Art, though that would be convenient and easier to explain. I mean art as in painting. And you can also blame a specific period in history known in England as the Victorian period, but in the art world generally it is known as the Romantic era. And if there's one color that represented the Romantic period, it was green. If you listened to my last podcast, I mentioned a thing called pastoralism, which was when wealthy people pretended they were simple folk like shepherds. Remember Marie Antoinette playing shepherdess? In fact, pastoral used to mean anything to do with shepherds, though we tend to think of it a bit more broadly today. And of course, no one really dressed like shepherds. I found numerous articles on what actual shepherds of the time were wearing, which was smocks, and looked pretty much like the thing your elementary school teacher made you wear over your clothes for art time. Déclassé. No, they wore fancy clothes, like the kind you see on the little statues from the period. The idea behind most romantic imagery was a return to nature, getting away from the cities and living a simple rural life, though obviously without the grubby work out in the fields. And if you're going to return to nature, you need a lot of green. And not just any green, it had to be vibrant. Oh, darling, that green is so fresh. Yes, quite. Until the 18th century, most paints were made by mixing minerals and herbs and whatnot. Early in the 18th century, though, chemists began experimenting with chemical compounds to create colors. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. They were often trying to come up with something else, and the color was a happy accident. The first of these chemical colors was probably Prussian blue, which I want to talk about in another episode, so I won't say more about it here. The advantage of the chemical colors was that they were often vastly cheaper and in some cases less disgusting as well. Another fun fact: to make so-called natural dyes, living creatures were often killed, crushed, cooked, squeezed, and/or fermented. Tyrian purple is an excellent example of this disgusting process. Certain types of sea snails have mucus glands that create the color. The snails could be milked, but that was labor-intensive, and also, milking mucus glands? Ew. To speed up the color creation process, the snails were usually crushed and then cooked on a very low temperature for about a week while they rotted. This method required killing 10,000 snails to color one garment, and the resulting smell was described as something like rotting fish, egg, and garlic all rolled into one. And guess what? That smell didn't wash out. My favorite thing about Tyrian purple is that this was a European noble color, so the kings liked to have clothes this color. But apparently dignitaries from other lands often complained about the stench.
Ugh.
Classy. My point here is that the chemicals should have been a good thing, both for preserving nature and people's olfactory senses. You may hate the smell of paint, but it can't be anywhere near as bad as rotting snails. And the other advantage of chemical paints is that the colors tended to be much more stable than those created with natural products. This was especially the case with green paint. Think about it. What are some things that are green? Plants, and certainly some plants were used to make green colors for paints and dyes. But there could be a lot of variation in the shade of green from a plant, depending on the growing conditions. And what happens to a plant when it dies? It usually turns brown, and if the paint preservation process was done slightly wrong, this is what happened to the paint. Brown where you wanted green. Your grass is dead. Another option was copper, which tarnishes to a green color, but again, a lot of variation can occur and is hard to control. There were some minerals like green earth and malachite, but the first was not vibrant and the second was prohibitively expensive. The final option was to somehow mix blue and yellow, but the results were often unstable and could change in unpredictable ways. So natural items were not great for making the kinds of colors that the Romantics wanted. Hence, chemical paint. Ironic when you think about it. We tend to think of chemical paints, and chemicals generally, as being dangerous because they're not natural, but really, everything is made of chemicals, and while some chemicals are obviously more dangerous than others, just avoid those ones and no problem, right? Unfortunately, no one told this to the chemists making these colors, though I feel like that really shouldn't have been necessary. I mean, duh. As you can guess by now, one of the chemists made a toxic green color. The year was 1775, the chemist was Carl William Scheele, and the color was eventually called Scheele's green. It was immediately popular, and if you ever see the color, you'll understand why. Honestly, it's gorgeous, and when you look at it, you instantly think foliage and greenery and sheep grazing on the lawn and all the things that made up the Romantic period. The color was eventually so popular it was not only used in paint, but clothing dyes, wallpaper, books, artificial flowers, children's toys, and even occasionally food. In fact, it is still possible to get items that were colored with the original Scheele's green. I found a lovely Victorian-era green hat in the color on a website, but it came with a strict warning. What did the ad say? Danger. Contains high levels of arsenic. Love it. Never going to stop. It's worth mentioning here, before we get into the nastier side of things, that A. Scheele was a brilliant chemist who specialized in pharmaceuticals before creating the color that bore his name. And B. Scheele was in no way malicious. He wanted to be helpful, but he had the misfortune of somehow being overlooked by history. He is believed to have discovered numerous elements and chemical compounds that remain influential today, but somehow credit for those always went to other people. So when Scheele created this amazing shade of green that was both stable and affordable, he recognized its importance and was determined to get credit this time by putting his name on it. He wasn't the first to use arsenic in green paint, he just had the misfortune of his color becoming popular. By the 19th century, Scheele's green had come to define the aesthetic of the time. It had also started making people incredibly sick, literally, though no one wanted to admit it. Instead, people blamed mysterious illnesses. In one tragic case, an entire family got sick and at least 2 children died. A public hearing was held and authorities found that the children had died of cholera due to unsanitary conditions and that the parents were at fault, despite the fact that their doctor had found nothing in the home to suggest such a diagnosis. Obviously, it couldn't be the arsenic-laden wallpaper. I mean, there's a profit to be made here. Come on, people, get with the times. By the mid-1800s, doctors had started to sound the alarm about rising levels of arsenic deaths that couldn't be easily dismissed as cholera or murder. Scheele's green became less popular and was eventually replaced by a similarly beautiful green called Paris or emerald green. And somehow, chemists believed they had solved the problem with Scheele's green by adding more arsenic. These are supposed to be smart people. What the heck? Thankfully, people took less time to realize the dangers of Paris green, especially when a doctor in France, Dr. Ange Gabriel Maxime Vernois, did a tour of Paris workshops in 1859, where women were making lovely foliage to grace Romantic-era homes. Dr. Vernois noted that most of the young women working there had sores all over the yellowing skin of their hands and arms, not to mention physical maladies like nausea, diarrhea, and abdominal cramps. And all over them, trapped in creases of their skin and even in their very pores, was a dust-like substance the color of Paris green. Just a couple years after Dr. Vernois made his observations, a young woman in London who also made flowers died a particularly gruesome death where, basically, everything about her turned green, even the whites of her eyes, and after a lengthy illness, she died in agony and convulsions. Green got you feeling sick yet? But wait, there's more. I sort of glossed over it earlier, but yes, I did say that they put Scheele's and Paris green in foods and candies, like we use food coloring today. One food in particular that was popular to color was a dish called blancmange, which is some kind of milky gelatin pudding. I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever had it, and if I did, it wasn't called blancmange, but the internet says it's still commonly served. Normally, the dish is white, which explains why the name basically translates to white food. And as white food, it made a nice canvas for adding various colors to make the blancmange look fancy. And what was fancier in the Romantic age than green? So chefs like to add Scheele's and Paris green to their blancmange. In one particular case in 1860, a chef made a blancmange that killed at least 3 people. You know, I genuinely hope they enjoyed it. I would hate to think the meal that killed them was bland. And you know what? I haven't even mentioned Napoleon yet. He passed away back in 1821, but many people believe he ultimately died because the wallpaper at his house on St. Helena contained Scheele's green. The theory is that the humidity on the island caused the arsenic to leach out as a gas and sped up his death, showing that no one was safe from this stuff. not even the most powerful. It didn't matter whether you were rich or poor, that Democratic green was gonna get ya. Finally, people realized that their favorite green had become a nightmare color, and it was time to stop using it. In fact, for a while, society rather turned against green, seeing it as a source of death rather than life. I mean, that poor flower girl who basically turned green, that's an awful image. Eventually, green's reputation was partially rescued. It is still the color of new life and plants and so on. That meaning was never lost. But it never entirely lost its newfound bad reputation either. Instead, the color green came to have two meanings, one that was good and one that was definitely bad. So, the answer to the question, how can green simultaneously refer to something good and bad? It's because green originally was associated with new life and beautiful things, going back thousands of years. However, humans being human, our obsession with capturing the beauty of green led to indefinable pain and death for many people. The memory of both of these meanings is buried within our collective conscience to the point where we don't know why those two meanings exist, we just know that they do. I feel like I'm falling into a pattern here, which is kind of the opposite of random. I think it's actually an antonym. So next episode, I'm going to break the pattern by looking at another topic I quite enjoy, genealogy. And this time, I'm going to answer the question, who were my ancestors? For one particular person, my brother-in-law. I've mentioned his ancestors before, and I promise, it's a crazy story. Drama! This has been Roz's Random Ramblings. All research and production are done by me, Roz Hirsch, because it's fun and keeps me out of trouble. The following are musical works that I used in this episode, including copyright information. The first was Fats Waller's singing Ain't Misbehavin', which is off copyright. The remaining songs I obtained through a subscription to the website called epidemicsound.com. These include Fields by Franz Gordon, which is playing right now and in several other places, and Abyss of Sadness by John Bjork, which played during the sad parts, rather appropriately. Happiest Camper on Earth by Stationary Sign, which played while I was talking about the gross process of making Tyrian purple. Yuck. Open Fields by Johann Landqvist, which played while I discussed the etymology of green. And Bis dann by Trabant 33, which played while I whined about how hard it is to learn German. Also, I keep forgetting to thank Colin Bryce, who has lent me a lot of sound equipment as well as giving advice on how to use it. I release new episodes every Monday at noon, Mountain Time, which in my neck of the woods is on permanent daylight savings time. And as always, thanks for listening.